All right, let's jump right into today's explainer. Welcome, future officers. As your civil services mentor, my goal today is to cut through the noise and curate the absolute most high-yield topics from today's Assam Tribune, specifically geared towards your upcoming APSC exams. We are looking at the June 3rd, 2026 edition, and we've got some massive developments to cover for your general studies papers. Here is our syllabus map for the day. We've got geography covering monsoon dynamics, economy focusing on the transition to PPI, polity looking at global press freedom, international relations diving into U.S. trade in Nepal, and finally, history exploring the Indian knowledge tradition. Section 1, Geography, Monsoon Dynamics. Okay, so you know how crucial the southwest monsoon is to our entire agricultural cycle, right? Well, the India Meteorological Department has officially adjusted its expected onset over Kerala to June 4th. They had to backtrack a bit from their earlier May 26 prediction because the seasonal winds have remained unusually weak over the past few days, which is just delaying its advance to the mainland. But here is the underlying cause, and this is absolutely critical for your exams. Emerging El Niño conditions are fueling this delay. As an aspirant, you need to have this definition locked down. El Niño is characterized by unusually warm ocean surface temperatures in the central and eastern Pacific, and it's triggered specifically when those easterly trade winds become weaker. This heavily increases the risk of extreme weather globally. So, what's the local impact for us here in Assam? Well, while the mean precipitation in the northeast might actually remain normal, with the onset expected between June 5th and 10th, the broader South Asian region is really bracing for below-average rainfall. The National Forecasting Agency actually just reduced its 2026 forecast down to 90% of the long-period average. Make sure you note that 90% figure down for your GS Paper 1 answers. Section 2, Economy, Transition to PPI. This is a real game changer for macroeconomics. We are looking at a major structural shift by the union government, moving away from our legacy wholesale price index to the globally preferred producer price index. Why? To get a much more realistic, accurate assessment of price changes. It aligns perfectly with IMF standards and gives us a sharper look at input, output, and service inflations. Now, they aren't just flipping a switch overnight. It's a very deliberate 5-year phase-out plan. On June 15, 2026, they are going to release a revised WPI series with a brand new base year of 2022-23, finally replacing that old 2011-12 base. At the exact same time, they'll launch the new trial PPI series. Running them parallel for 5 years just gives the entire economy a chance to adjust without shocking the system. The true superpower of the PPI is its granularity. It's broken down into output, input, and services, starting with banking, telecom, and railways. And here is a fantastic distinction to remember for prelims. Output and service PPIs use the basic price, meaning they completely exclude taxes and trade margins. But the input PPI uses the purchaser's price because, well, industries have to buy their inputs from the open market. It literally lets policymakers track exactly how inflation is passed from the factory floor right down to the consumer. Section 3, Polity, Global Press Freedom. Less than 1%. I really want you to think about that for a second. Today, less than 1% of the global population lives in a country classified as having good press freedom. It's a pretty staggering statistic about the state of democratic watchdogs globally. Looking impartially at this latest index published by Reporters Without Borders, the decline is incredibly widespread. Over 52% of countries are currently facing difficult or very serious obstacles to journalism. Even traditionally high-ranking nations are slipping. The US has actually dropped 47 positions since 2002, landing at 64th. And rounding out the bottom, we see nations like Eritrea, North Korea, China, and Russia. It's an important data point for understanding global governance trends. Section 4, International Relations, US Trade, and Nepal. Shifting gears to bilateral ties, negotiators from India and the US are currently huddled in New Delhi for a 3-day discussion. They are trying to finalize the framework of an interim trade agreement, but they are having to scramble a bit to adapt to some sudden major legal shifts coming out of Washington. So, what happened? The US Supreme Court recently struck down specific reciprocal tariffs under the 1977 IEEPA. Because of that ruling, the US had to impose a flat 10% tariff on everyone for 150 days. This means our previous framework, which dropped US tariffs on India from 50% down to 18%, is basically out the window and needs total recalibration.
India's pushing hard right now to make sure we maintain a tariff advantage over regional competitors like Sri Lanka, Pakistan, and Bangladesh.
And speaking of the neighborhood, this brings us to a really fascinating geopolitical question sparked by Nepal's Prime Minister Balinder Shah. He recently suggested that regarding contested border territories, maybe third parties like the UK or China should intervene. So is there room for that? According to New Delhi, absolutely not. India firmly and completely rejected that call for third-party intervention over Lipulik, Limpiadura, and Kalapani. The External Affairs Ministry made it crystal clear that established bilateral mechanisms are entirely sufficient. They reminded everyone that a massive 98% of the boundary is already successfully demarcated between just the two countries. Section 5. History, Indian Knowledge Tradition. Let's ground ourselves with some incredible historical context from a recent lecture on the Indian knowledge tradition. It maps out how our foundational concepts were centuries ahead of Western counterparts. Kautilya was writing about taxation and public distribution in the Arthashastra about 2,000 years before Adam Smith. We've got Aryabhata's astronomy and Bohayana outlining trigonometry around 750 BCE, long before Pythagoras. And you know, this legacy of scientific excellence is still alive and well today. Just look at Assam's very own Dr. Atanu Nath, who just made history as the first scientist from the Northeast to co-win the 2026 Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics. All right, to wrap up today's explainer, I've got some homework for you. Take this analytical question right here on the WPI to PPI transition and write out a structured mains answer tonight. Think deeply about the granularity of the data and the very real challenges of a 5-year phase-out. Ultimately, how do all these separate pieces, from global trade to local weather, connect to shape our national policy? Keep analyzing, keep connecting those dots for your APSC prep, and I will see you in the next breakdown. Keep studying hard.